November on a high mountain. Moshe Kowalski stood right in front of a closed window in his big office based on the 12th floor of the building. He filled the room with a cloudy thick smoke coming from his cigar, while enjoying the breathtaking scenery from the window, which was a masterpiece of an amazingly manicured piece of a 26-acre of land, beautifully engineered high-tech building establishments, and a newly renovated rail station next to it. When the old station was transformed to a new one, the price of the assets rose dramatically. An investment firm that bought his old offices, that covered a 4-acre land area, was so stunned and amazed when they learned that Kowalski purchased a 26-acre land area in the same price. No wonder he was in a hurry to sell his property to them in a very low price. A week later, a computer company bought from him an acre of land for construction. He sold it at a price 10 times the total price he paid for the entire lot. When you're on top, he told himself, there are millions of opportunities to be rich. In the last couple of years, he couldn't find anything useful in his office anymore. In fact, his presence was not needed in the business. He then spent mostly of his time traveling around the world, enjoying the comfort of his luxurious yacht. Naor, his son, had taken total control of the business, as he went further, and eventually dragged himself into the world of communication industry in the United States, and proved that talent is hereditary, although there are times that Moshe had to help his son behind the scenes, without his knowing that his father's hand was behind everything. He sat on his desk and started to look at the picture of his son when he was small. He was so wrapped up with the memories of those days, when the door suddenly opened. He felt that he lost his sanity. He blinked his eyes and his imagination turned to a complete shock. What the hell do you think you're doing? He found himself roaring in English as the lady entered the room. The small boy who was holding her hand politely approached him, but Moshe pushed the boy away from him. Why are you so mad? Did you not miss your grandson? She replied in Romanian, while pulling a chair for the boy. She sat right in front of Moshe, trying to ignore his anger. She opened her purse and took out a cigarette, and lighted it. She got her legs crossed while trying to blow the smoke in Moshe's face. One stick of cigarette will not change anything with the stinky smell of your office. Moshe took a deep breath. Julia, we had an agreement. You are not allowed to come here. You have already done enough damage. Be fair, and go back to Romania. Julia looked at him with a very sarcastic smile, and blew another set of smoke from her mouth. It's time for you and your son to take responsibility for the child. I prefer my freedom over the money that you are paying me, she said, while caressing Daniel's head. Daniel pulled his head away from her. He stared at his grandfather. The excitement he had earlier was totally gone. His grandfather didn't like him. He knew it, it was obvious. Portrait of anger ran through Moshe's face. He was upset. Muscles in the face began to work out. He hated people who simply drag him into a situation where there seemed to be no way out. He was helpless. He was furious. Okay, do you need more money? You can have more. You can have anything you want, but don't ruin Naor's family. Take that kid with you and I will take care of everything. I will make sure that you will have everything you need, and you will live like a princess all your life. That sounds so interesting and tempting. Julia raised eyebrows as she replied. I have a little bit of a problem though. I met an American guy. He wants me to move in with him alone, without the kid. And I was thinking that it's not too bad for the little boy to stay with his father, or his grandfather. Don't you think so, Mr. Moshe Kowalski? Is there someone in your family who will agree to take care of the kid with the same condition? Moshe ignored the sarcasm in her voice. She smiled. Do you want to send him to hell? I for sure will go there if I do something like that. She twisted her cigarette in the ashtray, then got up. Oh, you are some sort of hell actually. She laughed and seemed to be enjoying his torture. Where do you think you're going? I need to go somewhere. I need some professional advice. I'm sure they will tell me what to do. After all, this is your grandson. I already have a plane ticket, and I will be in a plane in 2 days. Where do you intend to go? Moshe asked. To the Department of Social Welfare. She took out some sort of a small paper, and slowly looked at him. I have the address here. Julia didn't know that Moshe was so scared of her. He tried the hard way. Julia, no one threatens me. You should know that. I'm sorry, this is your grandson. That's your problem. She took Daniel's hand. Say goodbye to Grandpa. She could not help but laughed. She saw a strong feeling of anxiety on Moshe's face, but did not notice the frozen face of Daniel while looking at his grandfather as they walked out towards the door. She got into the taxi which Moshe's secretary had called for her, and only then that she looked at Daniel's face. He was always a very serious child. But now he sat on the car with his eyes towards an imaginary point across the window. Do not worry, everything will be fine. Honestly, I never thought that your grandfather would not want to take you. If things won't work out, I myself will take you to your dad. But before that, we will try one more way to convince your grandfather. I know that you are upset right now, but at the end, you will see that everything will be okay, and you will become happy and even happier than being with me. Daniel kept looking outside the window until the cab stopped in front of the Department of Social Welfare. Julia went straight to Deborah's office, a woman with curly black hair, not well groomed, and ponytailed with a rubber band. Julia and Daniel waited while Deborah was talking on the phone. Julia inspected Deborah's eyebrows, that urgently needed some tweezers, but then she concluded that there was nothing to bother. Nothing can be done to improve the appearance of this woman. Deborah answered angrily to the man on the other line of the phone. Julia was so afraid that this meeting will be worse than her meeting with Kowalski, and decided to make it short. Look, this is the grandson of Moshe Kowalski. Julia opened in English, noticed the softness in the face of the social worker in hearing the name of Moshe Kowalski. She described the situation thoroughly in front of her and surprised to see the kindness in the face of this government official, although she knew that it was just some kind of pretension. I understand your reference to us, but it's not within our jurisdiction. I would suggest you to contact a lawyer. Besides, you know that the grandfather is not responsible for the child, the father is. You can't do anything against the grandfather. Deborah tried to calm down her voice, although she was shocked by the revelation. Julia was silent. She had already prepared an alternative plan, but she had to make sure that Deborah will take part in her action. Look, I understand you don't take care about such things, but can I just leave here a note? I'm going to fly to America in 2 days, and if the child will be left alone, it's good to have some basic information about him, right? Deborah looked up. You can leave me a letter, but I still suggest that it would be better if you give it to a lawyer. Julia had already thought about that alternative, but since she was leaving in 2 days, and wanted to leave the boy to her, it would be more helpful to leave a letter to a social worker than to a lawyer. Deborah took the letter from her. After all, it was just a letter, and it won't hurt anyone. She looked at the skinny blonde woman heading out of her office. She told her to close the door after her, but ignored, because she had already gone out. Deborah got up and locked the door. She needed to make some personal phone calls to someone, and she didn't want to be overheard by anyone from the office. She dialed the office of Kowalski. As expected, his secretary informed her that he couldn't answer at the moment, and instead asked her to just leave a message. But Deborah insisted to wait on the line, and asked her to tell him that it was an urgent call from the Department of Social Welfare. Indeed, just like Deborah thought, Moshe Kowalski answered. His voice seemed to be a sweet melody that was so pleasing to the ear. She told him about Julia's visit and the letter she left. She wanted to know what will happen to the child if her mother leaves to America, since, according to her, he was the boy's grandfather. Moshe admitted to himself that things are out of control, but kept himself cool. That's what she says. Do you know how many people like her roaming around these days? She had a brief affair with my son, all right, and if she thinks that he is his son, there are ways to deal with it. I'm at least not the right person to address with, and certainly not you. I'll seriously check on the matter and see how it goes. Right now, for me, I'm just updating you, but if it will become worse, there's a need to notify my superior. Moshe was silent. He never thought that Julia will go to the social welfare's office, and certainly did not think to break the agreement and leave a letter. He needed to get it, otherwise he will be a dead man. What does the letter says? He asked, trying to see if Deborah opened it and read its contents. I did not open it. I guess she wrote the thing she told me. Moshe was relieved. Listen, Deborah, I'm ready to pay a visit to your office and give you my version, and it's only because I have a great respect for your work. Deborah was filled with a sense of belongingness towards her job. I have meetings all day. I will be free from work at 8 o'clock in the evening. Do you work until late hours like these? He said, as he entered her office, which was the only office staffed at that time. These are not regular working hours, but phenomenal visitor, like you don't come every day. She said, smiling at him. Would you like some coffee? You don't believe it, we have an espresso machine here. It would be great if you could make me some coffee with whipped milk, he said, hoping that it will keep her longer in the kitchenette. I'll be right back. Just as when she left and headed to the kitchenette down the hall, he grabbed her bag to look for the letter. Mixed among the papers that caught his eye was a white envelope. He opened it quickly, removed the contents, and replaced it with another letter, plus a silence fee of $3,000. When he heard the sound of her shoes coming, he had already managed to return and found his place. The coffee was perfect. Well, Mr. Kowalski, what do we do about this story of Julia? I came to tell you that Daniel is not my grandson. I'm willing to do some test to prove it. I admit there was a bond between me and Julia, for some reasons I couldn't tell. But between that and be a grandfather of Danielle, he stood up, "Look, you are a nice woman. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I'm willing to give any information you want to ask, any time. By the way, what about the letter? Can we read it?" "No, I'm sorry, not unless something will happen. It's nothing personal against you, I hope you understand." "Yes, I understand. Honestly, I really don't care. It shouldn't be any of my interest." Deborah did not understand what just happened. She was confused. It was all about Moshe. Her only role in the whole system was to make coffee. Suddenly everything seemed detached from reality. She had never been lucky from this gray and eroding job to suddenly pop up a valuable story. She thought that there was a big story here, and she wanted to handle it herself, so she didn't notify her superior. Moshe drove his car and headed to the hotel, where Julia stayed, hoping that at this late night hours it would prevent passers-by to see him. He called from a payphone and asked her to come down with the boy to discuss her agenda. "There is a solution," he told her. He noticed her approaching without the boy. "Daniel is asleep," she said, as she got into the car, but as she tried to find the appropriate position on the seat, she felt the syringe pierced her neck, and the car drove off. The next morning, the chambermaid entered the room of Julia to clean. She found Daniel alone. She tried to talk to him in Hebrew and English, but he did not answer. After cleaning the other rooms, she went back again, and found him still alone. She reported to her superiors about him, and after a while he was taken under the care of the police. Deborah was happy for the second opportunity that fall for her. She knew that the disappearance of Julia will rearrange the cards, and now her hands are up high again. She hurried to call Kowalski, and was surprised to discover that he was not ready to talk to her. She left him many messages again and again, but he never got back to her. Feelings of frustrations filled her. The letter was the only thing she could depend to. She opened it. The disappointment displayed in her face was indescribable. Dreams vanished in just a moment. All hopes and dreams that revolved from the letter of a poor woman, slowly reduced into few words. "I flew to America. I ask you to find the father of my son. Letter is attached for personal information of a Romanian man, and $3,000, that should probably help in finding his father." Deborah took the money in her pocket, and tore the letter. Daniel walked side by side with Deborah. His feet were having a hard time to stick for a fast walk. He ran, but his legs couldn't hear him. Her big palms were wrapped around his fingers, and found himself being dragged, as if nothing he could do to want her. He stumbled on a big stone. Deborah stopped and looked down at him, then pulled him up so hard until his arms seemed to rupture. He tried to wipe the sand stuck in his elbow, but he failed, and was left with a dirty, wounded elbow. He kept on walking, one hand holding the other that held a rustling plastic bag with white T-shirt and jeans with cuts in the knee, things he took with him in his new journey. The smell of the perfume that was coming from her was so heavy, which was a clear indication that things was rough. Though he was only 5 years old, he had no trouble understanding that from now on, his life will change completely. They stood in front of the gate, waiting for the school guard to open it for them. It was a big red gate, flanked with tall cypress trees boasting on each side that tried to make the place green, and to give a fresh atmosphere, and to prevent from being seen by some bypassers around. But they couldn't hide the sense of bitterness displayed in the abandoned parking lot. Roots and weeds grew in between the asphalt slots. The guard opened the gate for them, and Daniel was amazed to see a large green lawn. Deborah dragged him right into a pathway, like across the grass, disregarding the granule pathway intended for walking. She knocked at the door of the manager's office, ignoring the secretary, who was sitting in the doorway, and only to realize that the manager was not in the office. Then she turned to the secretary. "Is he not here?" "You mean the principal?" "Of course, the principal." Deborah didn't hide her anger. There was an expression of terror in her face, pulling out her glasses off her nose. "I don't have all day. Go and find him for me, otherwise I will leave this little boy in the office, and I will get off here." He went to pray. "It's just a matter of about half an hour." "Half an hour? I do not have half an hour. Why do I have to wait for a half an hour for a certain matter which doesn't even take more than 2 minutes to settle?" The secretary looked at her until she finished grumbling. She knew that the social worker was going to be surprised. The procedure of registering a child to a boarding school takes at least 2 hours. This particular case will take even more. She looked at the skinny little boy, standing upright, and looking around. Behind those bright blue eyes and long eyelashes lay undeniable sadness and anxiety. Deborah sent Daniel to sit in the hallway. She was restless, walked back and forth, smoking cigarette one after the other, rubbing her hands together restlessly. Daniel tried so hard not to meet her eyes. He already succeeded to upset her in everything he did during the last 2 days that he spent in her apartment. He looked at the right wing of the school, and saw a paved basketball court, concrete benches, and high fences built around. On the left side of the field stood a beautiful oval-shaped building, where the windows were rounded and painted blue. In front of the building, mounted close to the walls, were tall palm trees and ornamental trees, and colorful flowers were beautifully arranged at the base of each palm tree. Daniel saw a tall man with a large black kippah, a circular piece of thin cloth or lattice which the religious Jews wear on their head, as a symbol of godliness, on his head, coming straight to his direction. He shrunk in place, scared from the stranger. The principal entered the office, and Deborah ran hurriedly after him. She sat right in front of him without invitation. "Listen, Mr. Solomon, I brought a child to the boarding school. Let's arrange everything, and do it quickly so that I can live a normal life. Since the disappearance of his mother, I never had a single peaceful moment." "Let me elaborate something," Solomon said with a soft, penetrating voice. "This school is already fully occupied. Living rooms that are designed for 4 children had already 6 children housed in it. There is only 1 bed left intended for a child that will be coming next week. So, there is no way I can accommodate this boy, though I want to. But this boy has no family. I have nowhere to take him to. Not until I find a place for him that is much better. Try to look for another boarding school. After all, if he has no family, there is no preference in our school which has a great demand." He paused, and when he realized that she didn't respond, he said sorry, and stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. Deborah bit her lips angrily. She realized that the principal had no intention to make her life easier, but she didn't intend to give up too. She had already made a decision. She will leave this place without the boy. Listen, Mr. Solomon, your stories do not interest me. My job is to find a place fitted or not fitted to the child, just to get rid of him. If he won't be accommodated here, Ziana, my boss, will ask me to do a favor again, and take this boy and be with my children again, and I have no intention of doing so. I come across such cases all the time. I do not have time to waste my feelings for this, and certainly don't have the strength to handle all responsibilities, to host all social cases like this in my house. Just as when she finished, she grabbed her bag and left the place. Solomon, the principal, followed her out and called her to take the child with her, but she continued to walk on the grass path. Solomon went back. He passed over Daniel and rubbed his forehead. "Give him something to eat," he ordered the secretary, and went back to his office. He tried to think about the situation, and after a while he dialed Deborah's boss. "Hi Ziana, Deborah, your employee was just here. She left the boy here, even though I already explained to her that I had a problem accommodating new kids. I am begging you to send someone and get the boy back from here." Ziana was not surprised to receive a call from Solomon. Not when she sends Deborah for such a mission like this. Daniel's case was exceptional, and only a woman like Deborah, who lacked concern for others' feelings, was fitted to the task. "Yes, Deborah talked to me. She said that you only have one place available for a child who should be arriving next week. Put Daniel in his place. First come, first served. You know the school. The rabbi will not agree for a non-Jew child to take the place of a Jewish child. It's not that we are racists. You know that there are also some children here who are not Jews, but they do not take anyone's place." There was silence on the other side of the line. "Ziana?" "Yes, I'm here." "Solomon, try maybe to look for one more place for the boy. Just one more place. The boy just lost his mother." "How can I send him to Romania? You know what is going on there. Orphanages are full, cemeteries are crowded, and they just leave their children to starve. You must understand that if we can't find a place to accommodate him soon, we will be forced to send him to Romania. I have to find him a place until the committee will find a way and keep him in the country. No, Ziana, do not put me into the middle of this situation. I also don't feel good about the boy, but you have to understand that I couldn't give him the place intended for a child who has also his story, and not to mention the big difference that he is also a Jew who came from a religious family. Solomon, I'm also a religious woman, but just one look at the boy, and my heart tells me not to send him back to Romania. I know that you two wouldn't dare to do that. You wouldn't dare to do that." Solomon took a deep breath. "I know that I'll be sorry. I'll see what I can do." The secretary offered Daniel to sit beside her desk to eat the meal she brought him: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, bread, and fruit salad. Daniel stared at his plate and looked across the closed door of the principal's office. He hesitantly grabbed the bread and began eating. When he saw the principal coming out, he put down the piece of bread he held on his hand. "Orit, take him please to the preschool children's quarter, until we decide what we do." The secretary smiled at Daniel. After eating, she took his hand and led him to the new building, where they met Nitsa, the lady who was in charge of the house. "Hello." Nitsa bent over Daniel. His face was frozen. "I'm Nitsa, nice to meet you." "Come with me, I'll take you to your room," she said, as they slowly went upstairs. Daniel walked beside her. They got into the room where there were 3 built-in double beds. Netsa offered him a bed on the lower part. "Here's your bed. You'll probably prefer the upper part, just like everyone else, but it's already been occupied." Daniel did not look at her. He just laid down the bag on the bed and sat down. "No, do not sit down. Let's go find you some clothes." She led him towards the storage. Although it was still undecided what to do with him, and she had not yet received any instruction or approval to give him some clothes, she could not ignore the pretty little boy, who kept carrying with him the old fading bag, as if there were some treasures in it. She pulled off a few clothes from the shelves, and led him into the dressing room, helped him dress from time to time. For the first he smiled at her with gratitude and great satisfaction in the face, as he left the storage with a big bag full of shirts and pants. "Just put the bag in that closet. Don't arrange them yet." She preferred to speak to him in Hebrew, although he did not understand a word on what she said. They went down into the playing room, where there were kindergartens. Daniel was lying in bed. Lights off, he was scared. He wanted to cry, but he feared that it was forbidden. Last night when he slept in the basement of Deborah's house, he had been warned not to make a noise, but tonight, he could not help but cry. He stuck the lapel of his shirt in his mouth, to strangle the shedding of tears in his eyes. But this time, the tears were stronger than any threatening psychological hindrance. "You can cry, sweetheart, that's fine. I know that things were not easy for you lately. It has been rough, but I'm sure that after a few days you will feel much better, and everything will be all right. I promise you." Netsa's words, even if he did not understand them, calmed him down. She did not try to stop him, but rather continued to caress him until he felt his eyes closed. Solomon was sitting in his office, that he used for the last 15 years. He didn't know how he was going to explain to the rabbi about his decision in accommodating a Christian boy instead of a boy who was supposed to arrive next week. 4 children were supposed to be housed in each room. Not long ago, they added 1 more double bed, and there was no way to put another additional bed. There was only 1 bed available. The rabbi and the yeshiva star called him several times, but Solomon avoided the phone calls with couples of excuses. He knew what the rabbi wanted to discuss with him. It was about the letter he sent to the family of the child, informing them that they could not accommodate him to the boarding school. It was obvious to Solomon about the priority of the rabbi, and avoidance was currently a comfortable step. He hoped to find the right words to convince the rabbi, who was very extreme in his opinions. The secretary came in and informed him that the rabbi was again looking for him. Solomon saw anxiety in her face. She didn't like to lie to the rabbi, and which was right. Solomon took his coat and intended to leave the office for 2 hours, to save her from embarrassment. He left a stammering message of his whereabouts, and rushed to the front door. But then reality hit him faster than he thought. While preparing to leave, the rabbi showed up in his doorstep, escorted by 2 young rabbis standing behind him like bodyguards. Solomon felt some uneasiness. Just a moment ago, the secretary informed the rabbi that he was out of the office, and now he was standing right in front of him. The rabbi entered the office, while he ordered his escorts with an angry gesture of his hand to wait outside. "I just came back. I wanted to call you. There was this family that their child," Solomon wanted to continue, but the expression on the face of the rabbi explained that he didn't believe any single word that came out from his mouth. "I see that you are avoiding me. Be it clear to you that you can't get away from today's agenda and impose the law on you. But right now, I have something more important. Would you mind to explain to me what's going on here? Look, I examined the situation of the two boys. That leads me to a decision. To prefer a Christian kid over a Jew. No. But what can I do? The social worker just left the boy here. Where will I throw him? Okay, I need to convene all concerns regarding this matter, but you should know that at the end, the kid will eventually out of here." The rabbi held his beard between his thumb and his forefinger, trying to read Solomon's facial expression on what he said. Seemingly, Solomon was not bothered by his warning. When the rabbi sensed lack of seriousness from Solomon, he banged the table and stood up with a deep feeling of bitter anger. "You know, Solomon, this time you upset me. Who do you think you are anyway? You're just my personnel. You work for me, and not the other way around. This kid will be out of here, that's all." The rabbi went out, slamming the door. Solomon went out of his office and headed straight to the kindergarten, looked around, tried to find Daniel, but he was not on the yard. He went inside the kindergarten, and there he found him sitting reading a book. Solomon took the book from his hands and began to scan page after page. "What will I do with you?" The question was intended for himself. He felt a very deep compassion to the little boy who lost his mother just a couple of days ago. He wanted him in this boarding school. He knew that he will be fine here. But if the rabbi will go on his decision to hold a meeting, the child will surely be kicked off here. He looked up high and prayed to God to give him any sign or clue that will lead him to the right way. Solomon left his house that was in the school compound at early noontime, after his eyes were widely opened all night. But even as he sat in his office, the thoughts about Daniel didn't give him rest. He criticized himself in carrying out his decision, despite the rabbi's behavior, but he couldn't avoid it, because he knew that the rabbi's consideration was intolerable, since most of the money that was donated to the boarding school came from friends of Israel community in exile, and most of them were not Jews. The secretary passed him a phone call that detached him from his thoughts. Solomon paused a bit. He was afraid that it was a call from the rabbi, and he decided not to answer it. A second later, the secretary entered his office. "That was from the yeshiva of Rabbi Zohar. They are asking you to answer it right now." "I'll call them in a few more minutes." Solomon tried to delay the end. He knew what the rabbi wanted to discuss with him. He didn't have any solution that will settle the point of view of the rabbi. On the other hand, the sleepless nights he had gone through strengthened his decision to keep Daniel in the boarding school. "I figured through his voice that it was very urgent." The secretary convinced him to answer. Solomon hesitantly picked it up. "Yes." "Are you sitting?" "Shimon," the rabbi's secretary asked. "Yes." "What happened?" Solomon got himself ready. "Come to the yeshiva immediately." The honorable rabbi had a car accident on his way to the yeshiva in Bnei Brak. He died. "Come here right away." The words were stuck in his mouth. Well, I understand that you're upset. Get in here, everybody is already here. We will go together to the rabbi's house. Solomon was shocked. He was afraid that his prayers were answered. They say, warn your prayers, they may come true. And Solomon prayed for something to happen that would keep Daniel in the boarding school. And his prayers were answered in a way he never thought, or would have wanted to happen. Now he was shocked. He felt that he had murdered the rabbi. Is everything okay? The secretary asked. At that moment she noticed the pale face of Solomon, and rushed to give him water. Sit down, O Rita, he said, and she sat right across him. What happened? She asked again, worried. Rabbi Zohar died this morning in a car accident. Orit was shocked. Orit, I'm sorry for leaving you in this kind of condition, but I need to go. He got up with a coherent decision, passed through the kindergarten. He felt that his guilt burdened his sorrow. He looked for Daniel and found him again reading a book. Pack up his things. I will take him to Ziana's office, he told Netza with determination. Is the boy leaving? She asked sadly. Yes. And I'm not going to talk about this? Rabbi Zohar died in a car accident, and I am going to keep his last quest from me, to get Daniel out of here. Netza was shocked. She sat back. When did this happen? This morning, but I heard it just now. Netza cried. Look how many orphan children he left here. How can someone so righteous like him dies? It's unbelievable. She kept talking, while Solomon sat right across and shared the grief with her. When she calmed down a bit, she turned to him. We are in the state of grief right now. Why don't we wait for one more day just to give ourselves some time to think? Maybe it's just a coincidence. It can mean a lot of things, you know. Netza tried to take back her inference. No, Netza, I already made a decision. And don't call the death of a rabbi a coincidence. Solomon scolded her. That's right. But Daniel is just a small boy. Netza remembered the promise she gave to Daniel, though he didn't understand, but it was a promise. She decided to do everything she can to keep him in the boarding school. I don't understand. If the rabbi is not with us anymore, why can't we keep the boy here? Who will apprehend us? Solomon was shocked by her words. The fate of one person positively affects the destiny of another, was unacceptable for him. It was even some kind of cruelty, but he didn't want to comment on her behavior. This was all about his fault. My prayers killed him, he said with a soft voice as he closed his eyes.